Private equity firms typically make headlines for buying and selling large corporations. But in the past year or so, the industry has increasingly found itself circling more modest buyout targets, specifically mom-and-pop businesses. In the first quarter of 2023, small companies accounted for more than 61% of all US private equity deals. That's up from 50% in 2009. The primary focus is Main Street economy businesses, from local plumbers and dental practices to lumberyard owners and car washers. One owner of a small alarm installation firm in Kennesaw, Georgia, said he gets as many as 30 solicitations a month. In his words, it's a non-stop barrage. Scott, private equity is the largest private asset class, $2.5 trillion in deal volume in 2022, and that was a slow year. And when I think of PE, I think of big SaaS leveraged buyouts or healthcare roll-ups. Why are these financial operators interested in these smaller regional businesses right now?
Well, one, they have to go further down the supply chain because the kind of big private companies that were really attractive assets have been bid up to such extraordinary levels that there's sort of two types of big private company. The ones where the owners just don't ever want to be public and aren't interested and don't return their calls, or they've already been purchased. So, there's been in an era or a decade of historically low interest rates, a ton of capital, there's been just a lot of acquisitions. It's not to say there's still not opportunity out there. There's just the opportunity set isn't as great because you have more PE firms with more capital. And the number of companies has grown, but it hasn't grown as fast as the capital. And at the same time, PE is known for value add. It's smart guys, they're patient capital, they're willing to come in and invest for 5, 7, 10 years. And this is kind of the mother of all the whole is greater than the sum of its parts or scale play. And that is if you're a dental practice and you're doing $3 to $5 million a year with 3 dentists, you're spending 10% on marketing, operations, technology, which should be 5 or 8%, or even staying at 10%, just be much more effective. And you don't have someone in your office who really knows how to optimize the shit out of Google, or can't purchase software or CRM packages in bulk, or can't negotiate with suppliers, or maybe doesn't have best practices around patient management or revenue optimization or new technologies. So if you roll up, there's small kind of dental practices with 2 or 3. My dentist, or my old dentist in Delray, was a guy named Craig Spodak, and he had this amazing operation. And like most dentists, his dad was a dentist, he inherited the company, works really hard. Ton of innovation. I would bet he does, I don't know, $15 to $30 million. It's a big operation. And the PE guys come in and say, okay, if we roll this up, if we get enough scale, one, we can access the public markets. And a private practice like that trades at maybe 5 to 8 times EBITDA. But if we get this public, it trades at 12 times. So it's accretive there. And 2, we're going to take 20 of these acquisitions that equal 200 or 300 million, and we're going to centralize a lot of things that you're not great at. You're great at dentistry. You're great at relationship management. You're great at marketing in the local area. But technology, operations, negotiating with suppliers, HR practices, we're gonna create one back end across everybody, and for less money or a lower percentage of your revenues, do a better job. And then we might be able to access the public markets or another private equity buyer that doesn't want to buy our $20 or $30 million dental practice, but loves the idea of buying 10 or 20 of these things that are doing $300 million and growing 8 or 10% a year. That's a nice company. It's not dissimilar from what kind of Martin Sorrell pioneered in the 80s when he went around and bought all of these services firms known as ad agencies and smoothed out the variability and created a lot of synergy on the back end around operations, and realized that the key was the relationships that these individual agencies had with clients, but the back end, some of the access to capital, HR, infrastructure, whatever it is, and also smoothing out the variability of an individual practice created created assets that were now investment grade, which before were just small businesses. And they're doing this across a bunch of fragmented industries. I think you mentioned car washes and plumbing, but this makes a lot of sense. And I think there's been some big successes here. It's good for the dentist. He or she gets possibly access to some liquidity and maybe an increase in the value of of their practice because they have now 3 or 5% of a bigger asset that might go public. They get operational help. They get business advice. So, this is an example of capitalism at work. I don't imagine there aren't, some horror stories where they guys sell these things and they hate the company and they never get the liquidity they'd hope. And they also give up some control because they're no longer kind of in charge, if you will. But I think this is a super interesting strategy, and I think you're going to see it across multiple industries.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the notion that these private equity firms are actually net negative in terms of value added? Because, private equity just as an industry has received so much criticism in the past, particularly from people on the left. We mentioned Elizabeth Warren earlier in this episode. She's described them as vampires, particularly because of this dynamic where the PE firm will go to a distressed company, they'll load them up with debt, and then, whether or not the company succeeds, maybe it goes into bankruptcy, but the firm still ends up fine because it's taking its 2% in management fees. And then in addition to that, there's this other, truthful trope, which is that the main strategy across most PE firms is just laying people off. And Mia had this interesting data point, which is that the average PE acquired company has a 13% headcount reduction 2 years after the buyout. So do you think that there's a possibility, and by the way, I agree with everything you said in terms of value add, but do you think that there's a possibility that this secular shift into Main Street economy, mom and pop businesses could harm those businesses, and in addition, substantially reduce employment opportunities on Main Street?
Yeah, I think that's mostly bullshit. Private equity is an asset class where these individuals have raised a lot of capital. The majority, I know a lot of entrepreneurs who sold to private equity.
Yeah.
And the majority of those entrepreneurs like their partners. That's how they refer to them. And they got a bunch of money and they de-risked and they took a bunch of money off the table and they still kept a big interest in the new, part of a larger entity. And if a private equity firm borrows enough money and goes into default on it, they're not going to be able to raise more money. So the notion that their play is just to lay tons of debt on the thing and then declare bankruptcy and move on to the next thing, that's just not true. Their strategy is to come into a company, grow it or cut costs or both, and then take it public or sell it for more money based on business improvement. In terms of coming in and laying off employees, look, I think capitalism is about applying capital to its greatest use. And if a company can be run at the same level of profit with lower employment, that is going to happen. It's just a question of when it happens. And I would argue it's better to do it sooner rather than later. Now, having said that, I think private equity firms have weaponized government, pay lower taxes. I think that's ridiculous. I hope someday someone loves me as much as Senator Sinema loves private equity. They get to pay essentially long-term capital gains or lower taxes on what is a commission. They get a 20% carried interest, which is commission, whereas if I sell copiers, the commission I get is taxable at a higher rate. So the wealthiest people in America, private equity players, pay lower taxes. That makes no fucking sense. I would like to see I think there's all sorts of things that are screwed up about the system as it relates to private equity players, but private equity is a mechanism for buying companies, and there's two sides of this trade. The current owners of the business don't have to sell the business to private equity if they don't want to. If they really think they're evil and are going to lay off their employees, you don't have to sell. Agreed. And the people who buy that debt that finances the takeout are buying that debt knowing full well what is the likelihood they will default, and they get an interest rate or return on their investment commensurate with that. And people want to buy fixed income and get a basket of private equity company debt that trades at a higher yield, recognizing some will go under, most will not, and they get returns such that they can continue to take their kids to Disneyland. This is part of capitalism. If Senator Warren really wants to add value, she should do her fucking job and raise taxes on the wealthy instead of just, she's the referee that complains about the game and she's wearing a fucking referee's jersey. Then raise taxes. Anyways, these far left senators who want to demonize private equity and billionaires and tax rates, it's like, well, okay, it's too bad we don't have senators who can restore equity to our tax structure. Oh, that's you, Senator. That's you. We Democrats controlled all three houses, the White House, Congress, and Senate, and we still couldn't figure out a way to increase the taxes of the wealthiest people in the world. We still couldn't figure out a way for the wealthy not to weaponize tax loopholes. We still couldn't figure out a way to not have Senator Sinema, like literally bend us over in exchange for $1 million in donations from private equity people in a state that does not register any benefit from private equity, Arizona. Yeah. So, yeah, I agree, Senator Warren. You haven't done your fucking job. And the result is a series of companies and wealthy people who are not paying their fair share. But, don't hate the player, hate the game. Don't hate the game. Hate the person that makes the rules and is the referee of the game, and that's our leadership. What a rant, Ed. What a rant. That's it. That's it. This brand of meth is the right brand, whatever I'm on right now. Anyways.
Okay.
I forget where we were. Where am I?
We're wrapping it up now. So let's move on. Before we get to the week ahead and your prediction, Scott, let's listen to the prediction you made exactly 1 year ago in our very first markets episode.
My prediction, and I have been wrong. Anytime I use the word Tesla, I'm usually wrong. This company is still the most overvalued company in the world, and the market is looking for an excuse to take this company to the woodshed. And I think it's going to find it in China, specifically production problems in China, and the fact that the CEO is doing pretty much everything but anything to do with Tesla. He's managed to piss off the far left by saying that the Democratic Party is hateful, and he's also managed to piss off the spokesperson for the right, Donald Trump. So I think all of this is going to take a toll, and at some point, every stock here is getting beaten up pretty badly, and Tesla is actually held up. It's down 30 or 40%. So my prediction, and again, don't trade on this because I usually get it wrong about Tesla, pain. That's not fair. That's not loving, Ed.
Well, actually it is because, let's make the argument for you, which is it got cut in half 6 months later. Yeah. But then it came back. So it's back around where it was
when I made the prediction.
I'm looking at a year ago it was at 240. December it's down to close to 100, so more than cut in half. And
you didn't bring up the prediction when it was down at 100, did you?
I bet we did. I bet you don't.
So I was very right, and now I'm just meh. I was very right, and now I'm meh. Yeah, my emotion clouds me here. I have trouble. I can't see clearly. I thought CoinDesk was going to zero, and CoinDesk has been ripping.
Coinbase.
I'm sorry, Coinbase. Yeah, CoinDesk, Coinbase. Coinage. Coin the term. Yeah, but I appreciate you bringing that up. Are we going to do this every week? We're going to revisit our predictions?
Hell yeah.
I like that.
Hold ourselves accountable. Hold you accountable.